we have with us Mary Lynn Musgrove. She's a professional counselor here in Old Worthington, and she is a specialist in relationships.
I think I owe you a happy dollar because we're at Valentine's Day, and I really like Valentine's Day. I had my first date with my husband on Valentine's Day. It was Valentine's Day in 1957. So this is 2014, 2017. I've been in love with him for 60 years. And so I'll give you a happy dollar at the end. Can you hear me okay?
No. Get it in closer.
Like this? Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that okay? A little closer? Okay. So you know that deep into marriage, you no longer get upset with each other's idiosyncrasies, right? And so after more than 50 years of marriage, I noticed yesterday, I have a habit, I really like lights, and so I go around the house turning the lights on in the evenings, and I go from room to room turning on the lights, and then I leave the room and the lights are still on. And my husband's quite a thrifty guy, and so he no longer gets upset with me about that. He just waits a little while, and then he follows me, and he starts turning off some of the lights. And then last night he came up to me, and after he turned off some lights, and he smiled at me, and he said, "We just have separate jobs." He said, "You're the light turner oner, and I'm the light turner offer." That's it. That's marriage. That's old marriage. He loses his hammer. He always loses his hammer. And then he thinks someone might have broken in and stolen it. Just his hammer. So I no longer get upset about his losing his hammer. And when I find it, I put it behind my back and I say, "If I were to find the hammer, what would you give me for it?" And so in old marriage and deep marriage, the rough edges disappear. And when we found, after many decades, that our marriage was still as fresh and joyful as when we started, we realized that we needed to do something with that. So we began volunteering to newlyweds. We take couples when they get engaged, and we meet with them every week until they've been married for 18 months. And the reason that we stay with them that length of time is because my husband, Sam, is a civil engineer and builds tall buildings. And he says that if you're an inch off on the foundation, by the time you get 30 stories up, you can hardly build it. And so if we could help people get a better foundation in for marriage, or help them repair the foundation, that would be a way of passing forward how grateful we are. In addition to both of those things, I am a professional counselor, and my clients teach me year in and year out. I've been in the same office room for the last 35 years in Old Worthington, and my clients teach me that the most important thing in life is not what they own or what they achieve. They teach me that the most important thing in life is relationship. If they are spiritual people, it's their relationship with the one they worship, but the relationship with yourself and the relationship with the most important person in your life. And so, thinking of coming to be with you today, I thought, it's Valentine's Day, we could just have a lot of fun. I love the jokes about love and Valentine's. And then I realized that's not really fair to you, because this may not be your area of study. And I go to conferences, read constantly, hire experts all over the country, and I am a serious student of how people get what they want most in life, which is deep and true and joyful relationships. decided that instead I should spend this next 17 minutes telling you one aspect of what happens in relationships over time and how they can get better. If it happens that you are not at this time married, then you might be able to use what we'll be talking about in reference to the most committed relationship you have had, or to save this for a day when you will be in another committed relationship. And so I'm going to talk about only one aspect. Marriage has so many aspects. We could go for a year, but I'm going to talk about just one aspect, and that is the aspect of marriage called erosion. Why is it, here's the question that I hope at the end of these few minutes you will know the answer to. Why is it that some marriages stay fresh and joyful, and some marriages erode over time, to the point that they come to me saying, we're just not close anymore. We've drifted apart. There are marriages that get broken apart, but more marriages simply erode. And so I'd like to begin in an odd spot. I'd like to begin by talking about babies. What do babies need and what do babies get if they have a normal, healthy home, a normal, healthy baby? Mother sits in a rocking chair, holds her infant, sings to her child, cuddles them, strokes them, soothes the child. And what we know is the child's heart rate slows, the child begins to rest, the child becomes peaceful. And over time, I'm a pretty serious student of interpersonal neurobiology, and there's some beautiful little videos at Harvard that show what happens to the child's brain as a result of that kind of attunement and responsiveness over time. The child begins to develop the ability to self-soothe, to comfort oneself, to have kind of a peaceful, secure inner place to return to. And from that experience, the child develops a template. And if you're a student of the brain, you know about the tripartite brain, and you know that this middle part of the brain where we have no language, but our experiences are stored from the very first. It's the place we used to call the unconscious. That in that part of the brain is stored that earliest template of what it is to be loved. So, what happens in marriage? In marriage, it turns out, we're still carrying that template. Still looking for that. And here comes this one special person who feels like this is the one. This is the promise of being so attuned to, so seen, so supported, so comforted. This is the person I want to marry. And we carry that template into marriage because deep in our brain, without words, we're remembering. Why do you think so many love songs go, baby, baby? And if that original figure can give us the kind of comfort and support and nurturing and love that we long for and might remember, then we become available to give that back to the other. But what if we didn't get that delight and constancy in those earliest months of life from the one we call mother? There was an interesting experiment done decades ago by a researcher by the name of Margaret Ainsworth. Ainsworth put together the strange situation experiment. And in this experiment, and it's been replicated many times, in this experiment, a mother of a 1-year-old brings the 1-year-old to the experiment room, which is set up like a playroom with an attendant in it. The mother brings the 1-year-old into the room, says to the child, "I'll be back," leaves the room for 3 minutes. The child, of course, doesn't know how long the mother's going to be gone. The child protests. All children protest that the mother's going to leave them in this strange place. She leaves the room for 3 minutes, so there's nothing to learn from the fact that they all protest, of course. But what's interesting and what Ainsworth realized is what you measure is what happens when the mother comes back. And when the mother comes back in the room, children show up as fitting into one of 3 categories. The children who got that in that first year of life, who we call securely attached, go to their mothers, fuss a moment, and then they get busy and play. But what about the child whose mother was not so available? What if the mother was sometimes tuned in, sometimes angry, sometimes unpredictable, sometimes intrusive, sometimes neglectful, and there is no steadiness in the relationship? There is no template of safety. What happens to that child? That child has trouble developing the ability to self-soothe. That child carries a sense of unsafety and is always, without language, worried about, am I loved? Am I lovable? And so we call that child not the securely attached child, but the anxiously attached child. There's a third category, because the anxiously attached child goes to the mother, cries, complains, holds on to her, doesn't give up, and has a long period of unrest on the return of the mother. But there's a third category. It's called the avoidantly attached child. What if the mother was uncaring? What if she was unresponsive? What if she was neglectful? And so that child becomes, over time, even in the first year of life, becomes resigned, realizes, I can't turn to relationships as a source of comfort. And so the child, in resignation, learns to withdraw from relationship as a possible source of comfort. Ainsworth research showing that some children at age 1 are securely attached, at age 1 are anxiously attached. Some children at age 1 are avoidantly, turns out to have huge implications. Because what do we see in marriage? What we see in marriage is that the template from early that first year shows up as the book in marriage. Why only in marriage? People say to me, I'm really nice to all my friends. I'm just furious with my husband all the time. Or he'll say, I'm really popular at Rotary. When I get home, I dive for the garage, or any other place, because it is all of us. We take that template, that unconscious template from the mid part of the brain. We look at this relationship through that lens. Why this relationship? Because when's the last time in our lives that we were in an encased intimacy with one other person? It was in infancy. That's where we learned who we are in a relationship. And so our unconscious brain says, we're home again. The template installed about ourselves and our most important other at age 1 is the template that runs our marriage. That sounds preposterous. The Minnesota longitudinal study of risk and adaptation of 200 people following them from birth until age 21 concludes this: the strength of their tie to their mom at age 1 predicted how good they were at dealing with their emotions and resolving conflicts with their adult partners at age 21. And so let's look at how this works. Bill and Mary are married. Bill has learned to be avoidant, to withdraw, to give up, to be resigned, to disappear. Mary is anxiously attached from age 1, never sure that she's really loved and never sure that she's really lovable. Bill comes in at the end of the day. His boss criticized him in a meeting in front of other people. He comes in preoccupied, kind of overwhelmed by it. Mary, meanwhile, has had a terrible day at home, or wherever she's been. And so he walks in the door and Mary starts. Here's what happened, da, 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 da. And Bill, overwhelmed, preoccupied, pours himself a drink, turns the TV up a little bit too loudly, and settles down behind the paper. And so they don't know what to do about it. Mary is anxiously attached, and so she yells at him, "You never listen to me. You don't really care." And Bill, being avoidantly attached, having learned early on that relationships are scary and that you better not be vulnerable, feels that criticism is proof of his inadequacy, and so not knowing what to do, he withdraws. They are stuck. They don't talk it through. They go to bed with it unresolved. And I promise you that everything in your own marriage and mine that we sweep under the rug will gradually build a space between you. They don't know that love is a constant process of tuning in, misreading cues, misunderstanding each other, talking it through, working it out, disconnecting, repairing, finding deeper meaning, finding each other again, and instead they speak in code to each other. She speaks in the code of accusation and protest, and he speaks in the code of withdrawal. Where did they get that code? And then it happens again to them the next week, and the next month, and the next year, and their marriage erodes. So the answer to the question that we started with, what causes marriage to erode? The short answer is that 2 one-year-olds are married to each other.